Okay, this is a presentation that I call Powering Up Your List Views, Getting the Most from Lightning Now. My name is Terry Cole. You can reach me at my Twitter address at Street Youth, or you can read more about the work that I do with Salesforce at my blog, mightyforce.org. My contact information is there. Would love feedback on this presentation. Love to hear from you. So today we're going to be talking about basic list view features that just work in Lightning. Tips for teaching your end users about list views. We're going to talk a little bit about intermediate list view features, and I'm going to give you some ideas about advanced list view things that you could implement. A little bit about me. I was a geek for 25 years as a high-tech engineer. I have been working with the nonprofit that I started since 2008, and I have a little white doggy named Rosie since 2009. So whenever I try to teach or tackle a topic, I like to break it into three levels: basic, intermediate, and advanced, and try to set some performance expectation for myself or others. When it comes to list views, I believe that the basic list view operation should be something you can, with practice, implement in 2 minutes. So whenever you try to do something, you shouldn't struggle with it for very long at all. Um, at the intermediate level, I think it should take you less than 30 minutes of definition and implementation to do. And at the advanced level, you're probably not going to do it often enough, so it'll probably take about 2 hours of research, definition, and tinkering. You'll never get the chance probably to become uh, super proficient at the advanced level. But it's something we all have to struggle with every once in a while, and it's good to know what is possible. So there are a bunch of Lightning list view features that just work. And I just want to run you through quite a few of them here. First, you will immediately go to a list view in a normal way, just like you do in class. You could go to an object tab of some sort, and you're going to see the usual recent items view, which you still can't customize, and you still can't change the fact that that's always what you're going to see initially on a tab. But you pull down that little triangle menu, and you will see all your list views. But we have a new feature in Lightning that allows us to search quickly for them. So you can type in that search box, and it will suddenly limit what you see in all of your list views to just items matching that. That is a super feature right off the bat. The next thing you'll notice is that, like Classic, you have a header and then objects listed in a table. Unlike Classic, it's actually a limitless table. So if you scroll to the bottom, it fetches some more. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, it fetches some more. So that's automatically an awesome feature. The headers act just like they do in a spreadsheet. You can grab the divider and drag it to change the width of the item. So right away, we get a nice feature there where we can set the width of each item so that we can fully see it. That's a great thing. And sometimes you may not be able to drag a field wide enough to see all of the text. And so we have a new feature called wrapping text. So you can pull down the little caret menu at the top of the header, and you get to choose wrap text or clip. Clip is what it is by default. So you'll be able to wrap it. And as you can see there, we can fairly quickly turn a list view into something that is easy to see all of the information, and that is super. You'll want to figure out how to do that. If you ever get to where you don't like what you're seeing, you can reset the column width using the little gear icon. And while we're at that gear icon, we might as well just look at the whole row there. New refers to create a new one of the objects. And the gear icon pulls down that list. That is a tabular view, and we'll talk about other views in a minute. The little circular arrow is to refresh the list view. The pencil is to edit whatever item you have selected. The chart icon we'll talk about in a little while, and there's a funnel icon there. So those are ways we get to control the list view a little nicer than just the edit button in Classic. Way over at the right of each item, you'll find a little drop-down triangle menu, and that's the action menu associated with the item. And we get to edit, delete, or change owner of this particular item. But the exciting thing is when you hit the edit button, up pops a modal pop-up box. And so you can edit the record without ever leaving the list. You can save that or escape and cancel that. Control S works for saving if it's a Lightning application. So it's a pretty big win that you can look at a large set of records and narrow down on one and hit the edit action button and edit it without ever leaving the page. That means the fields that you get to edit aren't limited necessarily to the fields you're showing on the list view. That's an awesome thing. When you want to change the list view settings for how it's filtered, you click on that funnel, just like in a spreadsheet. That's considered how you set that. You can change the filter values. You can remove them. You can add additional filter values, and you can add filter logic. So works very nice. And when you're done with that, you just hit save, and it pops out of your way again. We mentioned that little tabular view. That's what we're used to in list views, but we can pull that little menu down, and there's another view we can select called Kanban. Some people say Kanban. This allows you to organize the objects by a pick list value, and you can summarize them by some numeric field or the record count. So in this case, we have social media cases, and we see that one item is in the new category and two is in the working category. And we can drag and drop from one to the other, and that automatically changes that pick list value for you and saves it. We still have the little triangular drop-down action menu available to us. That's quite nice. The cards, they're called, that little square representation of the object is called a card. The card features four fields, and they are the first four fields from your tabular list view. So if you don't like what you're seeing there, go back to the tabular list view, click the gear icon, and change the fields, the order of them, and you can change what you see on the card. You can click that little arrow next to the Kanban to make it get out of the way, and you can click on the chart, and up can pop embedded charts. Very cool. Used to we could only put charts in reports. Now we can put them on list views. So a chart works pretty much like the embedded charts do for reports. You pop it up and it says, what do you want to summarize? What do you want to, anyway, how do you want, what kind of chart? And you start selecting the parameters. It's not infinitely flexible and infinitely formatable because list views are quick and easy to define. If you can, so you choose the summary field, you choose the grouping field. If you want to change that afterwards, you hit the little gear icon down there just underneath the chart. And there's an option under that gear icon that may not be obvious at first. It says you can add a new chart. And next to hit the title of the chart called cases here, there's a drop-down arrow. And if you define other charts, that drop-down arrow actually lets you switch between which chart you're looking at. So you can actually have multiple charts for the same list view defined and ready to go and just switch between them. So charting is a really nice way to get a quick overview of the data, quick feel for the data that you're looking at too. There are some Lightning features that take a minute to get used to or to learn, but they are still, I think, basic features. So let's take a look at some of those. The first is that we can select multiple records. That's not shocking to you, probably. There is a checkbox at the top that allows you to select them all, or you can pick just the ones that you want. That's really nice. Like in Classic, you can only do multiple selections if you're not using filter logic. Inline editing is allowed. In particular, inline editing is allowed under the same circumstances as for Classic, but we also get bulk editing, much like we do for Classic. We pick one of the records that are selected, change it, and there's a little checkbox that says, I'd like to apply that to all other fields. A little bit different than Classic. When you apply the changes to the field, that those affected records turn yellow. But remember that Lightning operates at the browser level, so you can actually make a bunch of edits, which will turn a number of the columns or values yellow. And at the bottom, you see that save or cancel button. So you need to commit the changes that you make while you're doing inline editing back to the server by hitting the save button. If you fail to do that, they would be lost. Or if you get messed up, you can hit cancel and none of the changes that are yellow will be saved. This is not available if you have filter logic, and it does require that you have a filter on the object for the record type if multiple record types are involved. The last, another thing that you can do is sending list emails. Now, this only works on contact or lead list views, but if you have contacts or leads shown, you can select one or all of them, and then you can pull down the little menu item at the top of the list view, and one of the options will be send list email there. Very cool. The same send list email feature is coming to campaigns in Summer 18. So this is a feature worth learning, even if you don't like it just for list views. You type in text, and just as you do in any template. When you need a field, you can use a field chooser. It's a little bit tricky in that you have to scroll down to the bottom of it, and there's this little funny markup icon that you use to pop up a list of the fields. There's a lot of them. It shows you every possible field you can access from that object, and some system fields. So you'll want to use the search box to limit the number of things that you do here. Here I've typed in first name, and it's showing me the standard field, one custom field, as well as the user first name. So you'll pick that, and it will pop it in for you. HTML and rich text are allowed, imported. You might not always want to type in your list email templates from scratch. You can save a template and insert templates. You can also get to classic templates from this same little menu. So that's pretty awesome. Now, one of the problems with classic mail merge is that you aren't sure what you're going to get, and so it's real important that you test. And another difference, by the way, is notice we define the template right in the same page where we see the object, the people that we want to send it to. We don't have to go to the setup menu or to some customization menu to define the template first. So back to the review, you can select review, and then you can see how the letter is going to look like for every single recipient. And if you don't like it, you can switch back to content and continue editing your template. That is really awesome. List email is sent from Salesforce email server. You can set it up in different ways beyond that. It is limited to 5,000 send emails per day per organization. So this is still a low volume thing. It's not going to replace mail servers, but it does provide a very nice way for your user to simply send mail from list views of contacts or leads. And it's coming to campaigns in summer 2018. The last thing you can do that's very simple from a list view and basic is you can add it to your navigation tab. I don't want to go through all of personalizing the navigation that Lightning offers now, but it's a little non-intuitive how you go about adding the list view as a tab. But the first thing you have to do is define it. Second thing you have to do is go to the tab that represents the object and say open in new tab, and that's going to pop up a temporary tab. Those are designated with an asterisk. And then you're going to pull down the menu that's right next to that temporary tab name and say add it to the nav bar. And that's going to give you that list view as a permanent element of your application, whatever application you're in. It's going to add it at the very end, but you can select the little pencil icon and you can move it to the very first top. So this gives users a way to see a particular list view as the very first thing they see when they switch in to an app. Users love this. In order to do that, personalization must be enabled. There is a way to disable it if you don't like that in the user interface. There's one other gotcha. Lightning allows classic apps to be made visible, and customization as well as keyboard shortcuts do not function in those classic apps that are made visible in Lightning. You have to go ahead and upgrade the application to make it a Lightning application. That's a simple click of a button, but you do have to do it. The lack of the pencil in the far right of the navigation bar means it is a classic app that has been made visible in Lightning. And you as the admin will have to upgrade it in order to make that pencil appear. Okay, so I hope you've seen a feature or two that you might think of as your favorite list view feature at the basic level. With practice, I think you can command these in 2 minutes or less. Now, every one of these features, once they've been enabled by the admin, is available to end users. And so in order to get the most out of them for your organization, you're going to need a plan to train end users. Users love the productivity and the efficiency boost. They love being able to customize their application navbar. This is, in my opinion, one of the most obvious benefits to Lightning to offset the temporary pain that they may go through if they were classic users transitioning to Lightning. And then lastly, I think you want to train your users to use list views because they're underutilized, and it helps identify those users who might become super users in your organization. The skills that they need to define list views are preparatory to the same skills that they're going to need to define reports. And in fact, now in Lightning, many of the vocabulary and even icon and motions are the same. So there's a lot of good reasons to train your end users. Now, how do you do it is a harder question. There are not a lot of options out there right now, I admit. It's probably going to take a lunch and learn type of situation with a presentation, much like this one, to train them. There are a couple of end user training resources that you could assign to some of your lead users, those types of self-learning users that you have. There are 2 Trailhead modules that I've listed here that are pretty good for working with Lightning list views. One is made for people who only know Classic, and the other is really made for people who are migrating. One is made for people who only know Lightning, and the other is made for people who are migrating from Classic. I was able to find 3 pretty good YouTube videos that expose the feature set. So if you have people who would just rather watch a 3-minute video, this is something you might send out to your lead users or maybe even to everyone saying, take a look at this feature and come to lunch and learn how to command it. So there's a couple by consulting and one by Salesforce listed here, all on YouTube. Okay, so that's the basic level. There are several things at the intermediate level that take a little more time to understand, a little more time to apply. And I'm going to show you two of them. I'm only going to talk about a couple of them because they are explained in more detail on my blog site. The first is what I call concierge fields. This is an attempt to build smarter fields that predict the type of information that you might need to see in the list in order to fully focus down and know exactly which record you need before you try to take action by going to it or editing it or changing owner of it. And as an example, I always use the example of John Smith. An organization of any size has a number of John Smiths in the database, and you however it is you work with each John Smith, there are some unique things in the database that would help you know more about which John Smith it is. And you could add address fields, you can add phone number fields, but you're eventually going to run out of space in columns. And so my recommendation is that you come up with a very smart formula field that combines information into one column that helps you differentiate who this John Smith is. It might say, John Smith volunteered first time June 2008. It might say John Smith, 10-time donor since 2009. It might say John Smith, who's a newsletter reader. But if you can build yourself a formula field that helps you disambiguate records, you're going to win the favor of your users because they'll spend a whole lot less time clicking into records and finding false records or dead ends and having to go back and start again trying to find the right records that they want. So that's what I call concierge fields. The second item is also explained on my Mighty Force blog, and I call them link actions. There are a number of things in Classic that you cannot do that there were appropriate link hacks to do. For example, in the Nonprofit Success Pack, we love affiliations and relationships, and there are link hacks to add an affiliation or add a relationship. And so I built myself formula fields that open up the appropriate page to do those tasks. And it turns out that it is also possible to do that in Lightning, not exactly with link hacks, but it is possible to do that. As a last resort, you can always call a flow by link to accomplish a task. So whatever it is your users are doing, if it's not supported by the little drop-down arrow at the far right of the list item, I like to add a formula field that contains hyperlinks to the things that we are likely to do. And that's very effective on a report, and it's very effective in a list view as well. So I won't talk more about those two. I will show you the next two, though. You can add a list view as a component now, and this is really nice on the home page. It may have application on object page layouts as well. You go to the setup, you open the same gear as you would where you would find the setup menu, but instead you're on a page and you edit the page. It might be the home page as this case, or it might be an object page, as I said. And the Lightning components that are available to be added are on the left, and lo and behold, you will find list view there. You can drag and drop that to any place on the page, and on the far right, you get to configure it, picking any object, any list view. You get to set a row limit for how many items are displayed. You can control whether the action menu is shown or not, and you can make it visible based on some conditions or not. And then you save and activate it, and you now have a list view. This allows you to have several list views that are row limited and on the home page. And if that's not sufficient, you know that your users can always customize their Lightning app by adding a list view in their custom navigation. So list views are pretty nice this way, but it is a little harder to set up, and it definitely requires admin privileges in order to create Lightning pages. You also can add list view buttons. That's not a new feature, but there is a new feature in Lightning related to this. If you define a quick action that updates a record or adds a child task or does something that is sensible to do to multiple records, that quick action can be added to a list view page and will operate on multiple records. And it's just automatic. You define the quick action, which defines a subset of fields that the user gets to supply and might have a bunch of predefined fields that are supplied behind the scenes for the quick action. And you define that, and then you add it to the list view. Now, I always forget how the list view buttons are defined, and so I went ahead and showed that here. You go into Setup, and you go to the Object Manager and List Buttons and Actions to see that you have an action, and if you want to define a new one, you say New Action. That part's fairly easy. And remember, as you define a quick action, you define fields in this case, and you actually can have no fields that the user supplies, as well as predefined fields, which I find that a lot of my quick actions have. That's the point. It's a reduced number of fields that the user is focusing on, and there are predefined. If that weren't the case, it'd probably be just as quick to use the edit. So that's how you define the quick action. Having done that, then you go back to the object manager for the particular thing, and you find search layouts. And that's a very strange location, in my opinion, for the list view, but within the search layout, you will find a very special layout called the list view. The only thing you can do is customize the buttons that are attached to it. So you find the search layout, find the list view, open the menu and edit it, and then you get to add any available quick actions if you'd like to it. That's just something that automatically happens, and it automatically works with multiple records. Very nice. All the other things you can do in Classic around this list view custom buttons are still available. So you end up with a special button, such as this one here, that allows you to select open social media cases and close them, and it makes sure that the status and the case reason and the type get set properly as it's closed. All right, so that's a couple intermediate things. I'm not going to go through these advanced items, but I wanted to share them. I don't know about you, but when I'm learning something new, it's nice. I can only handle so much at one time, but I like to know what's possible once I've gained a certain level of proficiency. And so I've listed 3 really cool things that you can do. You can add Visualforce list view buttons using a standard controller. So if you wanted to cause a Visualforce page to be run for multiple items in a list view, you can do that. And Salesforce has provided the documentation for how to do that. You can add a visual flow button to operate on multiple items. And Andy Fawcett has provided a method to do that. It actually builds on the previous item from Salesforce. And this is an exciting new tool that we have for declarative work that's coming from Doug Ayers. It's called Mass Action Scheduler. And here's the deal. If you can define any list view and any report and schedule that any items in the report or the list view get submitted to any declarative action in your org. This is a solution to a lot of problems. So, for example, let's say I have a flow that takes care of a certain type of lead in our database. And I have a list view that defines those leads. And what I want is every day that flow to be run on those particular leads. I can make that happen now. Another really good use of this is I have some type of flow that is able to fix some sort of data inconsistency, and I have a list view or a report that can detect that data inconsistency. Now I can cause the flow to be run automatically on a scheduled basis on that list. So I tend to think that the possibilities are almost endless and limitless for this new tool called Mass Action Scheduler, and it's all declarative. It's a little bit tricky to set up, but not really hard. And Doug has made it really easy for us. So those are my hints for what you might do in the advanced area with list views. You can get a lot more out of them than you used to be able to. It's very exciting. So we have covered a lot of features today. Basic level things that you should be able to do in 2 minutes, and maybe even more importantly, you can teach your end users to do them. Some intermediate level things that are for you as the implementer and admin, and some advanced ideas of things you might be able to do to make your org work better. We all collect data, and we work really hard to collect it, and we work really hard to make sure it's good and clean data. But what happens? Hopefully, it doesn't just go down a black hole and disappear. Hopefully, you're allowing your data to speak. It wants to. It wants to get work done. It wants to help you. It wants to advise you. Reporting is one way, and list views is another way. If you like this idea of exploring how can your data speak, what does it want to do, you can check out a presentation I have on reporting on mightyforce.org. It identifies 6 voices of your data at your nonprofit and how you might use those. So we're taking back a lot to the office today. List view features that just work, some end user training ideas, quick action buttons, custom navigation, visual flow buttons, and mass action scheduler for the advanced person to go off and learn. I hope this has been useful. Thank you very much. The slides are on mightyforce.org, as will this video be. Please give me feedback at Street Youth, Twitter handle, or by email. We love to hear from you. Thank you very much.